All right, we're officially recording. What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Build a Mine podcast. I'm here with Taylor and Patrick from Untethered Mining. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great.
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Like I kind of said offline, I'm really excited about this one. We're all heat punks here. You know, we met in person at the Denver Heat Punk Summit, and I got to see the Hashtec electric furnace firsthand. We got to see it powered up and working. It's a really cool unit, and we're going to dive into it a little bit. But before we do that, it's always good to get a little bit of background, a little history, so that the audience knows who we're dealing with, who we're talking to. And so, Taylor, I want to start with you. So what is your history, your background, and, how did you come to find Bitcoin? And then we'll pass it off to Patrick to do the same thing.
My experience in Bitcoin is it started around 2017, 2018. I walked into Patrick's house in college and I heard this loud, chaotic noise coming from upstairs in his loft. And I went to go check it out, and it was just this GPU rack, and they had makeshift ducting blowing the heat into their house. And I said, "What is that?" And my life was literally never the same after that one single question. Years later, in impromptu lectures from Patrick, it finally hit me what Bitcoin was and why it was so important. And I decided I wanted to be involved in the space. And we've always had an entrepreneur, what's the word I'm looking for? Mindset, yeah. So we tried to figure out, how can we make this a career for us, and how can we make it important to everybody else? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what got me started in the space.
Yeah, and what is your background like before Bitcoin? What is it that you were going to school for? What is it that you did? What were you interested in?
Well, I actually changed my major infamously about 6 or 7 times. I went to school at WSU, and every time I started to kind of really get the ball rolling on my next goal, I wasn't fascinated by it. I wasn't interested. I tried the medical field. I did bioengineering. I was really excited about that after a trip to the Amazon. And then I just did business for a while. And then I started working administrative and kind of worked my way up the ladder there. Still wasn't really excited. We've always wanted to work for ourselves. So again, we kind of circled back to what are things we're passionate about and how can we make that our life.
That's spoken like a true entrepreneur. You're in the right space. Patrick, on to you.
Yeah, so same kind of story. It just starts a little bit earlier. My roommate got me into it. Unfortunately, one of his friends had passed away, and when they were going through his stuff, they found some references to Bitcoin wallets and stuff. And so my friend decided, I'm going to help the family recover these funds so we can help pay for the funeral and all that. And then the whole house that I was living in college got into it and started researching it and diving into Bitcoin. We ended up kind of going down the altcoin rabbit hole too, and did some GPU rack mining, which he mentioned, and to heat our house in the winter. And then kind of went, kind of the typical story. We all bought a little bit, sold a lot at the top in the end of 2017. And then I didn't really look at it again for a couple of years until I was like, I really like this thing, kind of went all in near the, 2018, end of 2018. And the Sailor series is really what brought us like fully into like the Bitcoin only space and understood, this is the future and we need to be more involved. So,
yeah. I want to so what was like individually, obviously we each have our own perspectives, and the female perspective versus the male perspective is completely different. I've learned that firsthand, but specifically as to like what drew you into Bitcoin, what was that oh shit moment, that piece of advice or that thing that you learned that you went like all in, that you said, okay, Bitcoin is what we need to be saving in. We want to build a business in Bitcoin, and diving headfirst into that. I know it for everyone it's different, so I'll hand it off to each of you, whoever wants to go first.
For me, it actually started with an argument. After one of his amazing impromptu lectures, I just told him, I said, you can't relate Bitcoin to everything. You can't. It doesn't solve every problem. And he goes, he sits back and he says, "Give me something." I'm not happy with the quality of that rug in our living room. How can Bitcoin fix that? And he actually had the nerve to go down the rabbit hole of why Bitcoin was important. And to sum it up, basically understanding our financial system is of the utmost importance. And when you realize how much our financial system impacts everything from barriers to entry for businesses, quality control, being able to have competition, which also improves the quality of products, all of that stuff circles back to Bitcoin. And that was the moment for me that really clicked. I said, wow, he really solved the problem of how Bitcoin can improve the quality of rugs by, making things more price competitive, making things more accessible, being able to allow more competition in the space so that everyone has to maintain quality of rugs. And I went into it thinking I'm going to win this conversation. And that is one that I will admit I did lose. So it made that connection for me, that awe moment of, wow, it really matters to understand our financial system, and Bitcoin is the most prosperous option that we have.
It's so difficult for us individually to understand the financial system, especially when you grow up not learning about it. And Patrick, I can completely relate to you. You find this thing, it just makes sense, it clicks, and now you're trying to mansplain it to your wife, and she doesn't understand it because she has her own preconceived notions of finances and money and the way the world works, which is not saying anything bad. It's just that's how men and women relate to each other in different ways. And so I completely applaud you for being able to win that argument. And Taylor, I applaud you for seeing it through your own lens and coming to it. That is something that a lot of women in the space, like, it takes them a long time to get that. And it sounds like you kind of got it a lot faster than others.
Well, when it's around you every single day, when you're constantly hearing about it, like it's, the next big trend, I had to challenge it naturally. That's just how our relationship is. We always challenge each other to be the brightest and also consider the foundation of our own ideas. So
I love that. And so, Patrick, what was the, oh shit moment for you? Obviously, it happened before you explained to Taylor about the rugs.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a lot of lead up. I've always been very pro freedom and kind of anti-establishment. I like to be able to be autonomous to make my own decisions, and I think I'm smart enough to do that. And so I just little things over the years, right? They kind of compounded. It started probably with The Big Short, and I started getting into finance and thinking like, oh, the whole economy is a sham and it's going to fall apart, And then I didn't really know what the solution was. I just thought the sky was falling, and so it took a long time to kind of realize that Bitcoin was the solution to all of that. Just with little things throughout the years, and then really, like I said, that the Sailor series on the Robert Breedlove What Is Money show.
Mm-hmm.
Was kind of the tipping point for me. I was like, crypto is not the answer. It's Bitcoin, and it's proof of work, and it's for all of these reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we just went full head first into Bitcoin only. We operate 100% in Bitcoin now with our business, with our personal lives. I mean, we don't hold any fiat at this point, except for maybe a few days. We'll be between paying bills and that sort of thing. So it's been quite the journey to get there.
Yeah, I love to hear that. Do you guys care if we get a little bit personal? I mean, obviously, I don't want you to answer any questions that you don't feel comfortable answering, but this dynamic that you guys have, I think it's really important for people to understand that, like, you can have a healthy relationship, and like when it comes to like Bitcoin and building a business and like your marriage and stuff like that, a lot of people I'll try to frame this a little bit. One of the biggest issues that we see in the world with relationships and marriages is money. The arguments around, who brings in what, how that money is divided, all these things, and it causes a lot of problems. And it sounds like you guys have figured it out. Like, obviously you've had your problems, obviously you had to come to certain conclusions, but in terms of like finding Bitcoin, what were some of the biggest things that each of you individually, like, when you kind of like butted heads, what were some of those things that, like, those points where you couldn't quite understand each other's ideas or takes, and how did you kind of overcome those? I hope I framed that in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for starters, we had different upbringings. Now, I didn't grow up poor. I had everything that I wanted. I had everything that I needed. But when I went to college, I had to take out a loan, like many people do. Patrick didn't have to take out a loan for college, and he came out with a little bit of a savings account. So that start of our own lives, away from our parents, starting to be financially independent, that kind of thing, it was just, we approached it differently, because for me, I had the mindset of today, and Patrick had today and tomorrow, because he had that savings account, he had that little nest egg, and he was trying to figure out, how can I make this grow? How can I, provide for us, not only today, but how can I give us a life that we want in a week from now and a year from now, and how will that fuel us for year 10? So I never really understood the investment side of things, because I didn't have money to invest. And that was a little point of contention for us. And it wasn't anything big, but it was just a lack of knowledge on my side. I didn't have money, so why did I care to learn about the S&P 500? The Big Short was interesting to me, but I was one of those people that's like, well, the stock market's fake. You can turn it off, leave it off. But then again, getting my foot in the door, learning about it, and then when you marry someone and you have financial interests that are combined, you have to learn about it. And then you start piecing together their thinking, he starts piecing together my thinking, you come up with compromises, or sometimes you just say, oh wow, yeah, no, I was totally wrong. That is a really good opinion, versus in the past, we had financially separate accounts in college when we were just dating. So I was like, I don't care what he does. He can buy Bitcoin and I'll make fun of him for it.
That's a good way to put it, Patrick.
Yeah, I think it takes years. It's just kind of building trust and understanding the other person's point of view. I really like American Hodl's way of putting it, is that, like, if you're kind of a lazy piece of crap and you're not a responsible person, why would your partner ever trust you to manage the finances and to trust when you say, oh, I'm going to put all of our money into this digital coin that nobody understands, and bet our future on it? Like, of course, your partner's not going to trust you or believe in you. And so it's building that trust, understand, like, having those conversations and not just doing things, talking through them before you go and make some life-changing decision, like putting all your money into Bitcoin. It's just, I can't think of a specific argument, but I would say it's taken us years to really build that up, and it also kind of ties into our business too, right? Like, because we're a couple, we spend all, and I work from home, she works from home, we are always together. So separating work time and personal time is very difficult, and that's taken a long time to figure out as well, where we have to designate, this is untethered time, this is work time, this is personal time. And because it's all in the same space, like, there's no physical separation. You have to schedule it. Otherwise, those times bleed together, and it gets a little hard to manage.
Yeah, I wanna definitely touch on this topic of trust. I'm going to tell a story of my personal experience with Bitcoin and my wife. So before I ever got into Bitcoin, okay, let me take it back a little further. As a man, and Patrick can understand this, as a man, we feel a need to provide for our family. We are seen as the provider, the protector, and it's our responsibility to, bring home the bread, for lack of a better word. So for me, getting married in 2020 at such a young age, I think I was 25 when we got married. I felt this huge responsibility to provide for my wife, give her the life that she wanted, so that she could, feel comfortable enough to bring children into this world for me and for her, and to build a home for us. So I started, like, trying to think about all these things, investing, and I got wrapped up in an NFT scam. And so this was a really major point in our relationship, because the entire time she was telling me, this doesn't feel right, you shouldn't do this, I don't feel comfortable with this. And at the time it was a very small amount of money, you know, like just like $600. Like, it's not very much. It's really not a lot. But the thought process behind it was, well, you're spending money on something that has no way of making money. Like, there's no way to like prove this, there's no way to vet this, and then you're just not listening to me, and you're spending money. And I did it, and I lost the money, and it's still something that we talk about today. And going from that to, okay, I want to put our money in Bitcoin, was a very contentious part of our relationship. She didn't trust Bitcoin, she didn't understand it. She said, this is magic internet money, this is another NFT scam. And it took a long time for us to go from, you're putting your money in stuff that doesn't, or you're putting our money in stuff that doesn't benefit us, to, okay, I understand it, I trust you, put our money in Bitcoin. And that was a good like 9 to 10 month period before she finally trusted me again to make good decisions with our money. But for me personally, I think it was helpful to have that experience, because we could see where each other lies on that side of perspective, where, she is very conservative, I'm more like, she's risk adverse, I'm more risk tolerant. But where do we kind of meet in the middle and put our money in a place where we both feel comfortable? Have you guys had similar experiences?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Would you like to tell the story?
I think it's the same story. But so back in the last bull run, I was doing a bunch of trading on leverage, all that sort of stuff. Made a bunch of money. Was like, I'm quitting my job. Let's go start a business and travel the world in our fifth wheel, right? So we started doing that. And then, of course, Bitcoin tanked, got wiped out, margin called, lost most everything, had to go back to work. And so when we went to go back into this next cycle, and I was like, I want to go 100% Bitcoin. I want to have everything in Bitcoin. I don't want to sell the Bitcoin or try and time the market and trade it. I'm done with trading. Let's just hold Bitcoin for the long term. There was a little bit of pushback of like, well, like when it gets to a certain price, maybe we should sell it at a certain point. And it's taken quite a while for us to both kind of get on that same page of like, let's just hold Bitcoin. Let's not trade. Let's not do any of that stuff. Like, this is the future, and we're gonna stick with it. But yeah, exactly. Similar kind of story as you had with the NFT.
Yeah.
So,
well, okay.
did some NFT stuff too.
I think going back to my earlier point of, it is so important to have a unified like relationship when you're building anything, whether you're building a family or building a business. It doesn't matter. You need to be unified. And when you guys are coming at it from different perspectives and not agreeing and not seeing eye to eye, it causes strain on the relationship. It causes like damage to whatever it is that you're building. And so it's really good to hear that perspective of how you've kind of come to terms with each other's thought processes and the way that you do things. So it's definitely hopeful to hear, your story in regards to my story. And, we can all get there. It takes time, and, being able to frame it in the right way. We can't just, Patrick, we can't just sit here and mansplain to our wives why we believe in something. We have to tell the rug story and really give them their idea and help them understand it. So thank you for explaining that. Now I want to dive into Untethered, because as a fellow heat punk, I think what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. It's innovative, it's new, and it's exciting, but it also comes with certain roadblocks, certain problems, certain issues. You are building a company based around an industry that is, it's fledgling, it's a baby. I mean, the Bitcoin mining industry has only been around in ASIC form for 10 years, 12 years maximum. And now you guys are like, oh, we're going to build a company that designs heaters that builds like from Bitcoin mining. And that's awesome, but it's also difficult. So why did you guys, I'll take this all the way back and we'll just kind of build out from there. Why did you guys decide that you wanted to build Untethered?
Well, our main goal was we wanted to fulfill our entrepreneur mindset and come up with a business. And then we figured, well, how can we get friends and family involved in this space? Because we think it's important. We believe it is the next and final evolution of money. So how are we going to get our friends and family to see that and be exposed to it? So we created Untethered Mining, and it was just a small scale mining operation. We did it hosted, and we pooled together a bunch of cash with people to buy a bunch of ASICs and get them online. And that was pretty much it. It was very hands off. And that was our introduction to it. But trying to keep up with the mega mines and just the evolution of the fast-paced evolution of this industry, we needed to find a better way to be profitable and to maintain profitability as hash rate increases. Mm-hmm. So then we figured out, well, what are some things that we can do still in this space with what we've got going on? And we were playing around with the idea of heat reuse. And I told Patrick, why can't we come up with something similar to what you did in college? You know, just put some miners in a shell and have it ducted and heat your home. And then after a couple iterations and Patrick's engineering mind, we came up with a drop-in electric furnace. And it, again, with the goal of how can we get the general public involved in Bitcoin? Well, you can't just go up to somebody and say, this is why Bitcoin matters. There's so many reasons why it matters, but it's when you have that, it's honestly hard to get people excited about it. So then you have to come up with a product that everyone needs. Everyone needs to heat their home. Even us here in Texas, we have to heat our home at certain points of the month. So reusing the heat that is put off by miners was the next evolution for our business.
Yeah, we saw the benefit because we did a small scale prototype in my mom's pottery studio. We set up similar to this actually. We went and bought an existing electric furnace that a construction site had on wheels. It was all standalone, and what we ended up doing is we set up the high voltage lines to go both to it went to a switch first, and then it would go to the existing heating coils, and then it would go to a miner, and then that way we could decide we want heat from the miner, we want heat from the coils, and it would go and it would heat the pottery studio using the miner. And so that was our first prototype, and we thought, well, we can turn this into a business. Why are we trying to chase the existing mines in their revenue strategies, like flare gas and orphan wellhead gas? Awesome ideas, but if we were to start getting into that game, we would be a little bit late to the game. We would be at the point where we're kind of chasing that trend, and heat reuse is really a new trend. It's very new, and not many people get it. And we saw that that's our edge. That's where we're going to be able to be competitive and kind of get our first mover advantage, build out a cool product, and in the process help kind of be the Trojan horse of getting miners in people's homes, get people hashing at home, help decentralize mining, but also if people aren't as interested in the mining side of things, grow our own hash rate by leasing miners to run in these things, right? So then as a company, we're growing, whether we've got two revenue streams. We're either selling miners or selling these furnaces, or we're growing our hash rate, both of which are beneficial to our stakeholders. So.
Yeah, I mean, my audience knows this. I'm a heat punk. I love the idea of heating anything with a Bitcoin miner, and I've gotten to talk with so many innovative people doing really interesting things who have different strategies. I have not talked with anybody. So you guys are the first people that I've talked to that are building a furnace that looks very similar and works very similar to existing HVAC infrastructure. And now you know why that's important. I know why that's important. But tell the audience why building a furnace that looks almost exactly like a furnace that an HVAC technician already knows is important.
Well, I mean, what you said right there is one of the main pieces, building something that people already know. This is a new industry, and coming up with a new product is it's daunting in many ways, but you have to also consider the installers. So when they open that up, it's got all the standard electrical components that they're dealing with today. So they see that, and it's visually something that they understand and it's familiar to them. So that's one of the most important things. Also, it's a drop-in replacement. So it doesn't create this barrier of you having to customize your entire home's heating system to be able to put this in. You hook it up to ducting just like every other furnace, and you turn it on with your thermostat. So it's really easy. And that's the main thing that we thought was the goal for this iteration, is come up with something that is just an easy drop-in replacement, something that the installers know they can help troubleshoot, they can install it for people, and then something that is not going to be too daunting for installation upfront costs for a new consumer. Because these immersion systems, they're incredible. They make money, but they're very expensive upfront. And then you also can't just drop that into an air-cooled, air-heated home. You have to come up with something that is more compatible, or you have to completely redo how your home is heated and cooled. So this is a drop-in replacement. It's really easy to have that that next step for people.
Yeah, the main goals were, how do we reduce the cost to make it as cost effective for people to actually buy these, because people aren't necessarily willing to drop $10,000 on a heating system, right? Like if they're used to seeing an electric furnace that costs $1,500 to $2,000, and they see one that's $9,000, $10,000, they're not going to be as interested in that, right? A lot of the time, people are a little bit more, I'd rather spend less now and more later than more now and less later. And so that was a big piece of it for us. The other piece was existing infrastructure. How do you get a significant amount of hash rate into your home without having to build out a bunch of electrical infrastructure? With an electric furnace, they already are, if your home already uses electric heating, it's already 240 volt, which is what these miners are running on anyway. So you don't have to install new infrastructure to install it. You just have to replace the shell and then pick up your own miners and throw them in there. And then, you can use whatever miners you want. Whether it's the old, you could use M30s, M30S pluses is what we recommend, just for return on investment. It makes the most sense. But you could put in new miners, and you could make money heating your home rather than just subsidizing your heating bill. But it doesn't necessarily make sense for heat reuse systems, in our opinion. I think it makes more sense to buy equipment nobody wants and to put it in these systems. So
I completely agree with that. So in regards to like this major differential between a new standard furnace versus, a Bitcoin mining furnace being, $2,000 versus $10,000, what have you guys done to kind of bring that cost down to a more reasonable price tag for people who they don't understand Bitcoin, they're looking for a new furnace, and they're trying to decide whether or not they do one of your systems or just an old standard system?
We tried to maintain competitiveness with what's currently on the market. So within that it's a big range. It's like $1,200 to $6,000 for an electric furnace for something that could heat a home. So we tried to stay in that range so that we can maintain price competitiveness. And then we also are, it's something that you're always working towards, is constantly bringing down your prices. So with this pilot run, we didn't really have a whole lot of flexibility with how much we could bring down our costs for each unit. But with scale, you can bring down the price. Once we finalize the structure itself, then you can create molds. Then you can figure out, okay, well, can we get rid of a bolt here or a bolt there? What's the word I'm looking for? Channel your inner Rockefeller, right? If you can get rid of one screw somewhere over the entirety of, however many units you produce, it really saves a lot of money. So you just kind of have to constantly think of everything with that mindset is, can we make this more efficient? Can we reduce our time? Can we reduce our cost? Can we reduce our materials? All of that stuff is going to have a major impact without reducing quality, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so with the furnace, I think to get the cost down the most effective piece was using components that are widely available, right? They're standard HVAC components. And so the cost, HVAC hasn't changed in many, many years, right? It's been operating the same for a long time. And so these components are widely available. There's tons of different people that make the same components. So there's a ton of competition. It drives down the price. All of those components are standard, and they're pretty cheap to put in there. The other piece of it is sticking with a simple design rather than going with custom, for example, hashboard slots or any we cut down our costs too with labor, because we aren't pulling apart miners, having to rework them or anything. You're just building a shell, and then you can just throw full existing miners in there, and it doesn't require as much labor. So we shorten the time for assembly and putting it all together, and we lower costs by using standard components that are widely available. Yeah.
What is the average cost of one of your units?
So it costs us about $12.50 to make, and we haven't started a production run to sell them to retail yet, but we were thinking around $22.50. That might change, but we'll see.
Okay. And how many miners are you running? What you mentioned M30 pluses, so I presume that's what's inside of there. But how many are in there, and what's the size of space that you can heat?
Yeah, so it can fit 4 units. When we go into production, you'll be able to decide between 1 to 4 units. Right now it's just the 4 for our pilot run. It's a 14, which comes out to about 14 kilowatts, because it's 3.5 kilowatts per miner, which is about 49,000 BTU. And it really depends on so the size of space that you can heat is really dependent on the duty cycle that you're looking for. If you use this heater on a bigger home, let's say 2,800 square feet, it'll run more, which means that your return on investment will go down, but it's going to take longer to heat up your home from colder temperatures. It's not as big of an issue if you're just maintaining the temperature. But if you heat a smaller space with the same system with 4 units in it, it's going to run for shorter amounts of time to be able to bring that temperature up to what your desired temperature is. Which means that it's not going to run as often, which means your return on investment is going to take longer because the units just aren't running as much.
Yeah. So as far as like homes are different. Not every home is the exact same. The heating infrastructure for each home is different as well. Even with a plug and play system or drop in unit, it can be difficult to navigate the different zoning issues of homes. So, like 3 different stories, you have 3 different zones to heat. What are some things that you're thinking of with that? Are you thinking of like adding auxiliary fans to help push the air through the ducting, or are you using existing fans in the home HVAC system? Like what's going on with that? Like how do you navigate that hurdle?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, just so it's built in. So it built into the furnace is a blower that is standard for these electric furnace systems. As far as multiple zones and additional fans, that's not something that we've really thought about, and honestly, that's not really our target market. Mostly, right, like we're handling the heating side of things. If it needs auxiliary fans, that would be part of your HVAC technician would throw that in to help manage that system. Same with AC coils, that sort of stuff. Like our role as a manufacturer of an electric furnace is we produce the electric furnace. We give the engineers for whoever's building the house all the data that they need regarding the static pressure requirements for the system, what the blower can handle, and then they take it from there, right, for any of that auxiliary stuff. Okay,
that makes sense. No, I didn't think about that, but that actually makes a lot of sense. So projecting into the future, obviously these miners, they have a life cycle, not necessarily like a physical life cycle, but an efficiency life cycle. So what are some things that you're thinking of, as, we go 4, 8, 10 years into the future of like how these form factors change and, the miners that you're going to put in your system?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're really looking forward to the miners hopefully updating their current system so that we can have smaller chips. That would make it a lot easier to customize something like an electric furnace, make it smaller, make it prettier, bring down costs, all that stuff. And then also just, sorry, while I collect my thoughts. Can you repeat the question, Trevor?
Yeah. So you guys are building a company that specializes in Bitcoin mining hardware heaters. That hardware changes form factors over time as efficiency goes up and the costs come down. But the size of those machines change. So because you have a standard form factor with your Hashtec electric furnace, what are some things you're thinking about doing in the future in regards to like the form factors of machines changing?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so circling back to it, if they can make the miner smaller, bring down the chip size so that all you have to do is install that and replace the heating elements in an electric furnace, it makes your installation much easier, more efficient, and easier to customize. So then we can make our electric furnace a little bit prettier. We can make it different. You can go from a horizontal to a vertical. So a lot of current electric furnaces are vertically installed. So that's something that we could play around with. Currently, you need accessibility to the miners for things like maintenance. You won't need it very often, but that's something that we need to consider. So I think that maintenance will also be a little bit easier when you don't have this big chunky miner that you need to deal with. And then also think about weight, right? So we've got a shelf with 2 miners and then 2 miners underneath that. You need to be able to, they're like what, 35 pounds a piece, 40 pounds a piece-ish. So you need to be able to have something that is sturdy enough to hold the weight of the miner. So all of those things with the innovation of a new miner is going to make our innovation a little bit easier for us, and a little bit more exciting and prettier.
Yeah,
awesome.
We eventually want to get rid of having full WhatsMiners in there, right? That's kind of our first phase. It's the best way for us to get our foot in the door and get started. And we've got a few generations of WhatsMiners that you can put in there. You can anywhere from M20s up to M60s, right? And so we've got it buys quite a bit of time for it to be a feasible electric furnace for now, right? You can put M30s in there. You can put M20s in there if you wanted. It's not very profitable, but you're still making money doing it, right? It's because your electricity is essentially free. We're going to spend that money on heating anyway. It doesn't really matter what miners you put in there, how profitable they are. And so it makes more and more sense to put in
older units.
But as the hash rate continues to go up, M50s, for example, right now are kind of break even, a little bit underwater. They're, as the bull market picks up, they'll probably be profitable. But at the end of this bull market, they probably won't be profitable. And then they'll be great candidates to go in a system like this, right? And then the next cycle will be M60s, And so there's at least, quite a bit of time for this kind of design to continue to make sense. And then at that point, the goal is flip the thing vertical, put in custom hashboard racks, run it on a single control board, on like something that Michael Schnitzel's making.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's with all of the really cool stuff that they're doing at OSMU, and there's a lot of room for us to improve and iterate on this model. This is just phase 1. This is just step 1. It's really simple. It's meant to be cheap and work with existing systems, but we've got some plans to improve it in the future.
Yeah, it's get your foot in the door, get a product out there so that you can start bringing in revenue, so that you can start developing the product even further. That's generally how businesses work. You don't just step into the industry like I've got the best system that's ever been in existence. So completely understand, and I respect your guys' work. As far as like the control systems in your Hashtec electric furnace, I'm sure you've read Tyler Stevens' book. One of my favorite portions in the book is when he talks about the different types of heating cycles. You've got bang, bang, on, off, and then there's like a gradual increase and a gradual decline. Obviously, with Bitcoin miners, the gradual increase and the gradual decline is what's better and healthier for the life cycle of the miner itself. What are you guys doing? Is it bang, bang, on, off, or is it the gradual cycle on and then cycle down?
So right now it's on, off, hard on, hard off. And we plan on playing around with the cycles, the softer cycles, but I would also push back a little bit on it being negative or bad for the miners. There are arguments absolutely for it decaying the life of the miners, but it's pretty minimal. They're already designed to be turned off without cycling down or power or tuning down. Anytime there's a maintenance window at a mining facility, they're flipping a breaker and shutting the things off, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, we're doing it on a much higher frequency. It's every a couple times an hour maybe, And so there is some concern there, but you can add some system, some pieces or components to the system to limit that. And we've been looking at that, things like thermistors to limit the surge current when you start up the machines, which is probably the main piece that would degrade the systems over time with that constant on and off. Outside of that, there's not really. I personally don't think there's too much to concern yourself with, but I do think that people are doing some really cool things with tuning things up and down to be able to maintain exact temperatures without having that kind of saw wave pattern in your heating or the temperature in your home. So there's some really cool stuff that smart systems like this and that other people are building that can enable really fine-tuned temperature control and by room and all of that. So we're definitely looking at integrating some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, the industry it's growing rapidly, and with developments coming out of OSMU, with people like Twan from 256 Heating, with the heat punk movement in general, and what the space is helping to build, like there's a lot of really cool products that you could implement in your Hashtec electric furnace, as well as others can do, which just makes the space even that much more exciting. I think it's a really fun time to be alive, and I love that we have so many people building products like what you're building, because from my standpoint, being a heat punk, we believe in the ethos of Bitcoin, but we also want to find a way to integrate that into our lives. And the only way to Taylor's original point at the very beginning of the show is, like, we need to give them something tangible to hold in their hands, to feel the effects, in order for them to start taking that journey through Bitcoin and understanding what the better money is, why the rug can be better because of Bitcoin, like all of these downstream effects of Bitcoin, like putting a heater in their hand and saying, well, it does this, and this is how we get to this point, makes a lot of sense. So kudos to you guys. When I first saw the product, I loved it. And, I'm so grateful for people like you in the space. As far as like HVAC technicians and deployed units, are you currently talking with HVAC technicians and getting their input on the build and design of your system? Or is it kind of just like a fly by the seat of your pants? And then a second question is, how many of these units have you actually deployed?
So first question is a little bit. We have for the pilot run, that's kind of the goal of this, is to get people's feedback, mostly user feedback. But we've talked to a couple of other people in this industry. The Heat Punk Summit in Denver was absolutely a great opportunity just to get people's opinions of exactly that. What is it like installing your product in someone's home? Are you doing it? Are you getting installers to do it? How easy is it to train them and get them on board? All of that stuff. So it's definitely things that we've considered. Unfortunately, when you are a small fish and earlier on in the space, it's harder to reach out to those people and actually get feedback from them. So mostly it's a lot of anecdotal input and research that we've been doing on our side. We are definitely interested to communicate with the people that are going to be installing this, and I've actually discussed it with Tyler Stevens, is how can we kind of create an installer guide for people who need to learn these systems to install them in people's homes, and then also just basic troubleshooting on the miners, because we're not the only people that are in the heat reuse space. Mm-hmm. So even though we have different products from other people, collectively we need to come together and figure out how we're going to boast our installers. How are we going to give them the confidence and the tools that they need to be able to put this in people's homes? How can we turn them into salesmen for us? How can we make them want to install our product because it's easy and makes sense to them? So those are definitely all things that we need to think about. We have been thinking about, and we will continue to think about as we move on with our business. Did you have anything?
I think for the first question, sorry, can you repeat those again? It was
So the first question is like getting HVAC technicians on board and getting their input, and the second question was just how many units you've deployed.
Okay, yeah. So the first question, we've been working, or I've had a few conversations with Mike. So I'm gonna butcher his last name, Soflius. We met him at the Heat Punk Summit. He was on the HVAC on the panel talking about HVAC, one of the panels. He's been a great resource for understanding what data we need for engineers, understanding where to find that data, what is standard in the industry, all that sort of stuff. He's been a great resource. And then, to be honest, I've called probably 50 different HVAC companies and said, hey, do you want to, like, we built this prototype. Do you want to come check it out? We would love to, like, we want to get some design feedback and all this. And they're like, oh, is it installed somewhere? What model is it? What system is it? Oh, it's new. You just created it. We don't do that. We're not interested in that.
Yeah,
and
gotcha.
even with part suppliers, what we've run into too is that, we bought these blowers, and they, one of them showed up damaged. It was all busted. And I was like, I need to return this blower. And they're like, okay, what system was it in? Like, who installed it? And I was like, oh, it's, I bought it to put in this prototype that we're building. And they're like, oh, like, we can't, if we give you a replacement, we'll never be able to send you another replacement if you get a broken one, because you're not putting it in, official systems and having it installed by an official, by somebody. So, they kind of just like cut us off from being a supplier for us, because obviously we're not going to sign up to buy blowers from this company if they're not going to replace them if they send us broken ones, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of interesting, being cut off just because we're not one of the official manufacturers for that blower. Then we found other suppliers since then that are much better, but just kind of shows you how small, how difficult it is to prototype stuff like this in such an established industry.
Yeah. It's a tight circle for sure.
Yeah. And then how many are deployed? We've been running one for testing for quite a while. We set one up in my mom's pottery studio, and then we sent one off to another heat punk, unnamed heat punk, just because I don't know if they want to be shared, but
let's not name them.
Just to do some testing. And we've got a couple more units that we're working on sending out for the pilot run, or that we need to send out for the pilot run. And then after that, we've got quite a bit of work to do, just small design changes, things that we found when we were assembling them, all sorts of stuff that we want to change. So,
and then fun administrative stuff like a UL certification or ETL certification.
So I wanted to touch on that, and I know I'm kind of basically skipping over the units deployed completely, but the UL certification is something that is very important, because in order to, there's a process to get that, but once you get that, then you have more reputability with these fan companies and with the HVAC technicians. So where are you in that process, and what does that look like?
The process looks ugly. It is, it's a long process. It's an expensive process. And there's no one resource where you can just go down a checklist and figure out what all you need. So again, it's a lot of conversations and connections, communicating with other people in the space and seeing how they're doing it. With a prototype that is in our pilot run, we are using all UL certified parts. So every electrical component, every cord, every piece of this is UL certified, UL listed. However, the whole thing needs to be, the whole put together heater needs to be UL certified, but you can't do that until you finalized everything to a T. So if we decided we're going to move one hole from here to over here, that's a new product, right? So you don't want to get that UL certified, because it can cost like $50,000 to $75,000 for this certification. It's rigorous testing. They basically make sure that everything is cohesive. You have the circuits that you need to. It's not going to be a fire hazard, and longevity of it. They just kind of want to make sure it doesn't fall apart after a day of using it. So it's a really great thing to have, but it doesn't make sense really early on until you've finalized your product. And then that UL certification is going to be key, because a lot of commercial spaces, even people, if you're renting your home or your apartment, you may be forced to only be allowed to put UL listed heaters or ETL listed appliances in your home. So that means you wouldn't be able to install this in your home until it is UL certified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it becomes an issue with like insurance companies and, making sure that, the safe, like you might build a safe product, but does the insurance company know that that's a safe product, and can they insure that product? Definitely comes with its own hurdles.
Yeah. And a conversation that we actually had with an insurance company, just to make sure we're dotting our T's and crossing, dotting our I's. We all know where I was going with this. But just to make sure you're doing everything correctly, we were communicating with someone in the insurance industry, and it also increases the cost for the installers. So think about it, your HVAC technician, your electrician, they have to have insurance to come out and do work in your home. Using a product that's not UL listed is going to increase their liability and therefore increase their insurance. So that's also why it's important for people like us to get our products UL listed, because then it just kind of erases that barrier to entry for everybody. Gives the installer ease of mind, gives the homeowner or the business owner ease of mind, and then also gives us as a company ease of mind, knowing that our product is going to meet that safety standard. Now, again, with the pilot run, even though it's not UL listed, we test it, you use UL listed components, and we've talked to insurance companies to make sure that we're doing things correctly. But with a pilot run of 5 units, you don't spend that kind of money and then know there's going to be some changes in the design later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. And, I think the advice here to anybody who is trying to do what you're doing is just like making sure you cross your T's and dot your I's and taking it one step at a time and not jumping so far down the rabbit hole of like getting these UL certifications that you actually bankrupt your company before you even get off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a constant balance between spending money to make sure that you can grow and build something cool, and saving money, right? Like it's staying alive, survival.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys, with Untethered, do you guys have plans or intentions to build other types of units in the future? I mean, right now you've got an air-cooled system, which it's great, but Taylor, you had mentioned immersion systems. They are a lot more difficult to build and design. They cost a lot more. Are you guys going to stay specifically in the heat, like the air-cooled space, or are you thinking about going into immersion or hydro for like water heaters and stuff?
As far as residential, commercial building type heating, I think we're probably just going to stick with air cooled, and that be our niche, and that kind of be our lane. Because honestly, there's not many people doing it because it's not as fun and not as innovative and not as cool, right? So people haven't been as interested in doing it. I think we have a good edge there in the industry, even though it's a very small industry right now. I mean, I could you pull up the hashrate heat pump chat, and that's about everybody doing
That's
it.
the industry.
Yeah, that's the industry. So we've got an edge there, which is nice. And then, but we do have some ideas for moving into some other heat applications in industrial processes. We're too early to get into that, but
Yeah.
maybe next time if we come on again, we'll be able to talk about that.
We'll definitely have you on again. I mean, I want to keep tabs on how you guys' process goes. I mean, because you're so early in the design and build out, it would be so cool to just hear your take and your experience as you develop further and get further down the line and get more deployed units. I think it'll be great. So, we're going to start coming to a close. I just do want to say I appreciate you guys' time today, but, being somebody who's in the industry, building a product, trying to keep pace with such a quickly moving industry that is the mining space, what are you guys' thoughts on where you see the mining industry headed in the next 5-10 years?
Well, one of the biggest things is heat reuse, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. If you are in the mining industry, you know that it is nearly impossible to stay competitive with the mega mines right now. You just can't put up that kind of hash rate. It's very expensive to stay competitive with them. So I think we need to innovate and come up with other ways that miners are useful, and that is heat. Like from Tyler Stevens' book, heat is not a problem, it's a product. So when you pivot your thinking to that, what are some other products that we can come up with, or some ways of thinking that will help us innovate in this space? And then also there's just so many people innovating in this space that it's really exciting, and you may not even know something, but you can't have a conversation. Someone's doing something on the software side, and you spark an idea of how you can apply that as an engineer or an entrepreneur, or just even a spokesperson trying to advocate for Bitcoin because you're excited about it and have a wallet. There's just a lot to be excited about in this space and a lot to look forward to. And I think that one of the biggest things is we're going to see a lot of people pivot to the heat reuse side of mining. That's, I think, where we're going to go in this industry.
I
That
agree.
is, as a mining company, that is a question that we think about a lot. And some hard lessons that we've learned over the years, right? We started with hosting over in Maryland at like 8.7 cents per kilowatt hour, and that was fine during the last bull market. And then we moved to orphan wellhead gas because we were able to get a lot cheaper rates. And then we were starting to look at setting up our own site because we were thinking, oh, we can get cheaper rates. Or you're still got to pay basically for a kilowatt hour for generator maintenance, all that kind of stuff, right? So we've kind of scoped all of that out, and what we came to the realization of is that, well, heat reuse is going to probably eat almost all of these other forms of mining, right? Because it's zero. You can mine at 0 cents per it's 0 cents per kilowatt hour is what you're fighting with. Whether you're in flared gas and capturing wasted gas, that still has a kilowatt hour dollar amount attached to it, tied to the labor, the generator maintenance, the life of the generator, because it's only going to last you 7 to 9 years anyway, right? So it's a bunch of capital expenditure. You can think of that as a kilowatt hour amount spread out over 7 to 9 years that you're paying up front. The mega mines, right? Their hash rate is just exploding. It's just going to continue to explode until the free money runs out, right? Like their incentive is to take super cheap debt, buy a bunch of machines and put up hash rate, even if they're mining at a loss or not mining profitably or very profitably. And so you're fighting with your everyday miner is not going to be able to compete with that. They won't be able to keep up with the mega mines and everything. But because there is such an incentive for mining to find the cheapest source of power, and cheapest source of power being free power or heat reuse, right? They can mine. You're gonna see margins with mining drop to zero. That's just kind of the nature of the industry, right? Margins will collapse to zero, and because of heat reuse, margins can go negative for everybody. Well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't thought about that enough. But margins are going to drop to zero, and miners can mine at their home on heat or when they're heating for you could be making 10% back on your heating bill, and it still makes sense, right? Any percentage you're making back on your heating bill, as long as you didn't spend a ton of money on equipment, makes sense. And so I think those mega mines are probably going to either disappear or they're going to turn into government subsidized mines that help secure the government stack and ensure transactions go through. You'll see oil companies and stuff, they'll start to use mining for certain applications to help make new sites profitable that don't have pipelines. Some stranded energy, like over in third world countries, like Gridless is doing, where you see the incentive is we can build out infrastructure and it brings power to a community, but they don't. And mining is an instant way to start generating revenue to incentivize building out that infrastructure. And I mean, those are kind of the main. I think you're going to see heat reuse and stranded / wasted power. This is going to end up being most all of it. And yeah, we'll see.
It's exciting. I have to say, I've said this so many times before, but like with all the crazy shit that's happening in the world, you can get very pessimistic very quickly. But then when you get into the Bitcoin lens and you hang out in this industry and you start like spending your money in Bitcoin, saving your money in Bitcoin, building Bitcoin based businesses, you get this hope and this like fervor of like, we're gonna build stuff. It's so awesome. Like I really do feel like, and I've said this so many times, I feel like we're on the precipice of something like world changing, not just because we're fixing the money, but because that has downstream effects to fix almost every issue that we have in this world, from like our personal relationships to how we go about the world and make the world a better place. And I think it's exciting. So I have hope for the future. I do think that the mega mines are going to start to fizzle out because it's getting so competitive, because they have to throw up more and more hash rate, which costs hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. They're not going to be able to compete with us, who we're on a small scale using it for a process that we were already using in the future. And what effect does that have on a business that needs heat and needs that to produce the revenue? I think it's insane. I think it's crazy to think about. And I'm grateful to be a part of it. I'm grateful to get to have these conversations with people like you who are in the thick of it. So it's just an awesome time to be alive, guys.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Bitcoin makes me hopeful again. I think I've heard way too many times that I'm too young to be as pessimistic as I am, right?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin does definitely give you hope that things can be better and things will improve. So
Absolutely. Well, on that note, if you guys are familiar with the podcast, you'll know this. And if you're not, then you won't know this and it'll be a surprise. But on this show, I ask everyone who's new the same question. And so I'll pass it over to both of you, whoever wants to go first. But Taylor, Patrick, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
Do you want to start this time?
well, Bitcoin is freedom, and I am a freedom maxi. So I Bitcoin is hope. Man, that's a tough question. Bitcoin is so many things to me. It's become every part of my life. So I don't really know how to.
Well, if you could boil it down to the most important aspect of your life, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
Bitcoin means that my time and energy isn't going to be stolen from me in perpetuity, like throughout my entire working life, right? Which means that I can actually provide for me and my family into the future generations, that sort of thing. So
I love that. Taylor?
Bitcoin to me means prosperity, means freedom. It means, again, circling back to some things that we talked about, it reduces, if not completely diminishes, the barrier to entry for things. It gives you the freedom to carry your wealth with you, all up here. You could be backpacking with no possessions and still have all of your money with a string of words up in your mind, and access to it anytime you have internet, which is most places in the world nowadays. And it is that fresh lens, like you both kind of said earlier, that brings hope back to the world, that we can get rid of a broken system. We don't have to keep it, and we can put in something that is much better, much cleaner, and implement it to fix the world, fix the money, fix the world, essentially.
That was very well put, Taylor. I love that answer. I love asking people that question because, especially when it throws them off guard. Now, I've had a lot of time to think about like what I think Bitcoin is. And to me, I've said this before and I apologize to my audience. I'll keep on saying it, but the corniest answer I can give is that Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is hope, that to Patrick's point, that we can give our children something and they can value their time in something that is like actually worth something down the road, not something that is debased, not something that is stolen from them in perpetuity. Like, we are way too young to be pessimistic about the world. Therefore, we need to be able to have hope in the future, in our children's future, but without being able to save our time, our energy, our life force in a monetary system that doesn't steal from us. We can't find that hope. And that's what Bitcoin has given me. And that's what I hope to distill to people who watch the show. That's what you guys are doing by building a business where you're, giving people a product that pays them to heat their home. You're giving them a sense of hope. And so I love what you guys are doing. I want to help you guys out in any way I can, which, it's part of what we're doing with the show, is just to help you guys get the word out. But when you guys are ready to start deploying more products, you let me know, and maybe we'll throw some ads up free of charge, because I appreciate you guys. I just want to help you get out there as much as possible. So thank you for coming on the show today. Any final thoughts, any final pieces of advice that you guys want to give?
If you're in this space, communicate. Let everyone know what you're up to. Let everyone know the challenges you're facing. More than likely, if someone hasn't come across that issue, it will help someone who is going to come across that issue down the road. So communication and staying open and involved and helping each other out is one of the most important things about an industry that is constantly changing, constantly innovating, and at a really fast pace.
And if you're interested in our pilot run or learn more about the furnace, our website is untetheredmining.com. Or just reach out, email us at untetheredmining@gmail.com, and we can talk more about it.
Awesome. I will put all those links in the show notes, and then anything else you've shared me, I'll put that in there as well. Appreciate you guys' time today, and we will wrap it up there. Thank you guys for watching. This has been the Build a Mine podcast with Untethered Mining. Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Trevor. It's been a blast.